I've been at the table when legislation is hashed out, when programs are designed, and when policies are implemented. I've seen how City Hall works and how it often fails to work for us.
It's scary for me as a person who was born in this city to see a person with this lack of experience to take such a tough job.
Well, some of the back and forth there between Mayor Bruce Harrell and his challenger, Katie Wilson, who appeared last week on Seattle Channel in the first televised debate between the two. What are we learning about how the candidates will approach this debate season? And what about the money raising that's underway? A lot of moving parts there, plus some craziness ahead with the comprehensive plan, the roadmap for urban growth in Seattle, and also a look-ahead exercise for the budget that is really looking ahead and behind as well. All that and more this week on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I am a host on the Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are mine, and I'm with my friend and co-host David Croman, City Hall reporter for the Seattle Times. David, quick Mariners temperature check. They are in first place in the American League West as we speak. I don't want to jinx it, but does that make you feel good or nauseous? Where are you at?
Yeah, I feel better about where they're at than I have in basically since I was in middle school. And so that makes me feel uneasy that I feel good.
There you go. I kind of thought it was a combination of the two. Yeah, they haven't had this kind of a first place situation since 2001, I don't think. So yeah, we're talking about some history here for sure. Thank you, David. Thanks always to our background noise sponsor, City Grind Espresso on the first floor of City Hall. Thanks to all the patrons of the show. Pat just came back into the fold as a patron. Thank you very much, Pat. Appreciate that. Pat and other patrons can access Patrons First content. They get their own decal like this one right here. They can even send in questions to the show. What a deal. Find Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon and check it out. Also, you can watch this podcast on Converge Media. The video version is on Converge most Wednesday nights at 7. All right, let's do this thing. Time for Right Here, Right Now. Well, the push is on in the Seattle mayor's race as Bruce Harrell begins to lay out his vision for the city budget over the next few weeks. We'll get the official budget breakdown at the end of September here. And David, you wrote last week about the mayor's plan to offer an anti-gentrification and reparations fund to push back against redlining that limited housing for Black people in Seattle historically. And you mentioned in your story that Harrell has really stepped up his focus on affordability in the last few weeks with a challenger in Katie Wilson, who's made that issue the center point of her campaign and who also beat him by 9.5 points in the primary. I just have to ask, though, with a budget that is $2 million plus in the red, how much can Harrell come through with these affordability programs? How does he have to navigate this budget season politically, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's telling that this is $80 million over 4 years. So He doesn't say which 4 years. You know, it could be he gets $100,000 to study the issue this time and then says, yeah, and we'll get the rest in 2 or 3 years or something like that. You know, I mean, there are a lot of steps between that happening, between him announcing this and that actually happening. And, you know, I think there's a decent reality in which it never does happen. But I think it is worth mentioning because, I think anytime an elected official uses the term reparations as openly as that, I think that's noteworthy. It is a term that not everybody embraces, and once you start talking about reparations, it is committing yourself to a kind of a certain policy proposal that if you continue to go down the road, I mean, you're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars for what people have calculated out to be real reparations. So, you know, it opens the door to a much larger conversation, and I think that's interesting. But then also this piece about how it is fairly clear that his strategy has shifted post-general. I think he and his campaign have taken to heart how badly he did in the primary election, and I think they're in turn talking much more openly about affordability. I think it's always worth noting. I'll say in a general sense, it's an interesting time in City Hall right now because you have 3 incumbents in Harrell, Sarah Nelson, and Ann Davison who all did pretty badly in the primary,
right,
and are all therefore using their offices in City Hall to suddenly announce all of these new initiatives and proposals and plans and things like that. And it's not illegal, but it does kind of skirt that line of using your official office for campaign purposes. As a reporter covering this stuff, it gets a little difficult to follow all of
Yeah.
it because you'd be running around covering every new announcement from the three of them.
Hmm.
I do think it fits into that to a certain extent, but also it is talking about a real issue, which is that
Yes.
longstanding practices in Seattle, zoning practices really um, replicate a lot of the redlining
Hmm.
of Seattle that made it basically impossible for Black and Jewish and other minority groups to own housing anywhere in Seattle.
Yeah.
Um, Not to mention some of the explicitly racist restrictive covenants that
Hmm.
barred those people from parts of Seattle. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a real conversation that
Hmm.
is worth having, whether or not this is the thing that really gets it moving or not. I don't know.
Yeah, and I should point out, I mean, mayors do this every time they present a budget. They'll parse out small parts of
Yes.
it. They'll talk about it in the weeks leading up to it. So it's important to point that out too. But I did want to talk about the debate that I was able to moderate between the mayoral candidates on Seattle Channel this past week. Did my best, folks. There's a lot going on there, including the mayor asking a lot of questions of Katie Wilson. How many people have you hired? How big of a budget have you managed? She didn't have quick answers to some of those questions, but I think this was a telling moment for the Herald campaign. I'm also seeing here, David, a move from Harold that he's really going to go after her work experience. Good idea, bad idea? How do you look at that?
It's a predictable idea.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be his campaign consultant
sure.
or not, but it is the logical step for him to take. Because he's smart. He has smart people on his campaign, and they recognize very quickly and said publicly, look, the voting of the primary shows us that people are looking for some kind of change agent, somebody who's going to bring change to the city. And frankly, that's a tough sell for Bruce Harrell to make
Yeah,
because he's been in City Hall for as long as he has.
yep.
Uh, and he has been mayor, and people know him. I think in a poll from the Northwest Progressive Institute, it was only 8% of respondents had never heard of him.
Right,
So he's a well-known guy, and it's hard to convince people that you're a change agent when you're as well known as he is. He is
right.
trying to do that, but I'm sure they understand that's a tough lift. And so the other way that they can go is convince voters that Katie Wilson is not the right person
Yep.
to lead Seattle. And to do that, they are going to and have already, and as we saw in the debate, aggressively raise her resume. The fact
Hmm.
that she comes from, uh, her biggest government experience is basically as a lobbyist for progressive policies and
Hmm.
the head of this fairly small progressive nonprofit. Though, as Katie answered on your debate, it does include managing quite a few volunteers and
Right,
members. So it's not,
right.
I think the number of employees doesn't really tell the whole picture. But the point is, this is somebody coming from the kind of this is somebody coming from the idealistic world of left-leaning
Yep.
Seattle politics who now wants to be the voice of all Seattle voters, and they're raising that question. And I think your debate showed he's doing it quite aggressively.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And there's another interesting twist in the mayoral race. A great piece in the Washington Observer this week about fundraising, folks. Check it out. Harrell's campaign has brought in about $400,000 since the primary. Wilson about $320,000. So Harrell is now up over $846,000 in his war chest there. Wilson at $791,000 overall. Her early money lead has been erased here, essentially. David, I guess this is more on the lines of what happened after the primary, but what do you make of that swing in fundraising?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it was both of them came up against the democracy voucher imposed caps in the primary before the primary election. I think Harrell's people feel like they would have gotten over what Katie Wilson had raised in the
Hmm.
primary, and that it actually looked closer than it was. But I think probably more than that. If anybody wanted to give to Bruce Harrell, the primary results showed them that now is the time to do it
Yeah, yeah, right.
because he's in trouble. You look at like a Sarah Nelson and Ann Davison races, that I think in those, I haven't checked what their numbers are lately, but you might think if you're a donor, I'm not going to waste my money,
Mm,
frankly. Uh, the mayor's race, though, is close enough. Bruce Harrell is the underdog, but it is not locked up by any stretch. And so, if you are a Bruce Harrell fan, you're putting your final effort into um, trying to get him reelected. And I think there has been a lot of sort of community led stuff because
hmm.
he does have a lot of support. He grew up here. He has a lot of fairly tightly knit group of people who support him and who can get the word out about him. And I and he's still a well-connected, powerful figure in Seattle
Yeah.
who can raise money pretty quickly when he needs to.
Yeah, and the other numbers game here that I've been keeping an eye on are the IECs, the Independent Expenditure Committees. The one supporting Harrell has brought in about $764,000, according to Seattle Ethics and Elections. So just about, well, a little bit less than what he's brought in for his overall war chest, but that's a big amount there. And then you've got Wilson with a PAC supporting her, about $42,000 there. Some thoughts on the role that IECs will play, David. This seems to be a little more outsized than what we've seen in some of the elections past.
Yeah, I mean they'll be significant. I think a lot of them will be heavily anti-Katie Wilson
Yeah.
from Harrell's people, and Wilson will get, I think, some more labor support, and that will surely come her way, and that'll juice things up a little bit. But it's not going to compete with the sort of it's not going to get anywhere close to $700,000, I don't think, unless I don't know Nick Hanauer decides he
Sure,
wants to
right.
get
Hmm.
involved or something.
Who supports so many different progressive causes. Keep going. Yeah.
So I think it could make a difference because she's going to get hammered really hard by that pack. And like we talked about before, the strategy of the campaign is pretty clear, which is to pull down Katie Wilson to earth. Um, I think there's a question about how much money you can spend in a Seattle race and
Hmm.
have it continue to be effective. Um, I think back to 2019 when Amazon dumped $1.5 million in, and there was
Yep.
a lot of narratives that complicated. But when I remember at the time talking to people, and there was just a question of how many times can you show the same ad, and how many
Yeah.
times can you send the same mailer.
How many mailers you can put out? Right.
I do think to an extent there is a cap there. Um, but again, I think what Harold is trying to do is basically capture every because there's probably going to be something like 20,000 additional voters in
Yep.
this in the general election than there were
Compared to the
primary.
primary.
He's
Yeah. Hmm.
going to try and capture every last one of them, and then um, maybe bank that there were a number of people who kind of voted for Katie Wilson as a protest vote because they're not entirely satisfied with the state of the city, but maybe now that it looks like she's actually has a pretty good shot at winning, uh, think, well, I'm not. I was trying to make a statement, but now I might go back to Bruce Harrell. I think he's trying to bring back some of the people who have strayed from him and convinced every last person who is new to voting that he is the right person. And you know, $700,000 is going to go a long way to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, these IECs, they support a lot of different candidates. We're going to be talking about more of these in the weeks to come here as we lead up to the November election. I thank you very much for that, David. And I do want to talk about something coming up. You thought the comprehensive plan was crazy before. City Council is just getting warmed up, folks. We are taking a look at next steps for this urban growth plan and how you can get involved coming up on Now Hear This. Well, this week on Monday, Councilmember Joy Hollingsworth, the chair of the Select Committee on the Comprehensive Plan, which includes all the council members, released her package of proposed amendments to the plan. There were more than 100 in play right now, and she was really working on trying to whittle that down. As Councilmember Hollingsworth explained at a recent meeting, the idea of these many, many amendments is to respond to constituent concerns and hopefully get even more feedback in a constructive way.
We look forward to hearing from you, from your reactions towards specific amendments. And I know that there will be some people that have different opinions and comments, and just asking everyone just really nicely that we continue to be respectful and we look at each other's humanity.
Oh, the humanity. David, there have been some long, long sessions for these comp plan hearings, and on September 17th, 18th, and 19th, the Select Committee on the Comprehensive Plan is expected to vote on the chair's package of proposed amendments. There's a public hearing on the 17th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Last chance to jump in here, folks. I really thought, David, that Erica C. Barnett of Publicola did a great job of summarizing some of these big issues. Good article this week, folks. Check it out. I just wanted to get your feel on this. Where do you see the most tension on the debate when it comes to the comprehensive plan right now? Do you have some thoughts on that big picture?
Yes, I think this question of trees has become kind of the linchpin of this debate and the centerpiece for a lot of tension. Um,
Like you're going to
which is
clear cut our neighborhood, thing like stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an interesting debate because what we're talking about here is trees on private property. And so this question, which has been around for a long time, of what is the city's authority over trees that grow on private property
Yeah.
is a tense one. And it's why it took the city so long to get this kind of comprehensive tree ordinance.
Hmm.
Um, it should be worth noting that the city is planning to plant quite a few more trees than it's slated to tear down. But I think the concern is that some of the trees that we're talking about here are large and old, and that rubs people the wrong way. The argument that you'll hear from people who are pushing for kind of maximum growth in this piece is that when people talk about trees, maybe they're not actually always talking about trees.
Mm,
That really what they're talking about is concern for change more broadly of the city, and that
right.
trees are sort of a symbol of that, or a way to slow some of that growth down.
Yeah.
But I mean, we saw this. There was an proposed amendment from Councilmember Rivera, which was basically would have given the city the final word on changing how a site plan, like dictating changes to architects' site
Right.
plans
Right.
to work around trees. And that would have been kind of an incredible amount of authority to give to the city to
Right.
dictate how private developers are building on these sites. Um, that doesn't appear to have made it in the final package. But still, this question of kind of trees versus density, that doesn't have to be the binary. I mean,
Right.
I think there's a lot of arguments for ways that you can have both of those things, but that is kind of what it's become in some people's eyes. That has been kind of the biggest tension point here. I'll say that in the package that Councilmember Hollingsworth put out, a lot of amendments were included in the quote consent package. So this is the
Right.
package. Here's what I think there's broad agreement on, and we can take one vote and pass all of these amendments.
Right.
And those are pretty kind of those are pretty urbanist, to put it
Yeah.
in a reductive way, which
Hmm.
is, it incentivizes more stacked flats.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, there's one that would allow for not just corner stores, but stores anywhere on the block.
That would be a
Um,
corner store, basically. Right.
that could be a corner store, and there's a few more than that, like that would, I think there, and on one of the other bills, it would exempt ADUs from paying into the mandatory housing affordability.
Right.
There's some pieces here that are actually pretty urbanist, and it's interesting that that's where the quote consensus has come. But there are still quite a few amendments that are not in that package that are going to get quite a bit of debate. And I think the ones where we're going to see the fiercest debate is on this question of trees and what exactly is the city's obligation to ensure that trees on private property remain there. And what does that mean for the city and private developers' ability to add new housing?
Right. And I did want to point out, too, it is kind of crunch time here. The council really wants to be done with this by next week, after which it's full budget mode all the time. Committee meetings no longer happening until the month of November. David, do you have I guess it's going to get done because it has to get done. But Councilmember Hollingsworth is pointing out this was supposed to have been completed by December of last year, so that are already behind schedule. What do you make of this, I don't know, kind of crunch time we're in right now for the comp plan?
Yeah, I don't think anyone would say it's ideal to be doing something of this magnitude in September, because
Yeah.
September, but this does happen. I mean, I think September is sort of like garbage time, which is like everything that didn't get done gets crammed into early
Kind of
September.
catch up month. Yeah, you bet.
Catch up month. Try and get everything done in that month. Last year it was when they passed the soap and soda zones.
Yep. Right. Right.
I think, maybe I'm going off of memory here, so I might be wrong, but I think this council has a tendency to do more significant legislation in September than past councils, which
Hmm.
for my money probably is reflective of the fact that they're also new and green.
Hmm.
My memory is that past councils really prioritized getting their big legislative swings done by August
Yeah.
before they went on recess, so they could come back and kind of have a slow introduction into the budget season.
Right.
Certainly not the case here. I do think it'll get done. They've budgeted 3 days for this stuff, and if they
Right.
can't get it done in 3 days, I don't know how they are going to get it done. But um, I do think Yeah, it's notable that this is happening at this time. One other piece I will say about this though is the significance of this, I think, is much less than it could have been in an alternate reality in which the
Hmm.
state isn't as aggressive
Ah.
um, on zoning as it has been.
Hmm.
So I would say probably the most significant changes of these ordinances have already happened, which is the added capacity, added density in uh, basic what used to be single family neighborhoods in the across the
Yeah.
city.
Right.
Now what we're really debating is these neighborhood centers,
Yes.
and then some of the kind of stuff around the edges. But the meat of this proposal really is not a city proposal. It really comes from the state, and that I think is a much different conversation than the city was having last time. It was 10 years ago. Last time it did this comprehensive plan update.
Yeah, that's fair. I did want to talk a little bit more about the budget because there's an interesting presentation in the Finance Committee this week taking a 6-year review of the budget, reaching back to those pre-pandemic days of yore back in 2019. David, I thought this was kind of interesting. The intent here, the Central Staff Director for the committee, Ben Noble, was to provide more historical context to the council members here. And I confess I haven't gone through as closely as I would like over the full 114-page report, chock full of information there. But David, what did you glean from this? Why do you think the council is doing an exercise like this one?
I think because this is what a lot of them ran on, which
Yeah,
is budget responsibility.
yeah.
Um,
It's up 39% since 2019 was
yeah,
one of the headlines I drew from this. Keep going.
yeah, exactly. Which is, hey, let look at how much the budget has grown. Uh, let's then use that to parse out what we can shrink in a tough budget uh, year. I'll note that we're 2 years into this, and they haven't done that. And I don't know that they are going to do that. I think there's a pretty good chance that this budget season this new B&O tax gets approved, brings in an extra $80 million. The economic forecast improves
A
enough
little bit. Yeah.
that they can use the Jumpstart fund again to plug the budget hole and call
Yeah.
it good. And so it's interesting seeing this because it does feel like we're back in 2023 on the campaign trail a little bit in a way
Mm,
that I feel a little disconnected from that because this conversation about budget responsibility and auditing the budget and doing all of this is just not as pronounced as it used to be. I
yeah.
think there are a few reasons for that, which is one, it's always easier said than done. I mean, I think they came into office and found, of course, that's a complicated thing to do,
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah. You can't just find the money under the couch cushions on this kind of thing.
the other piece is it's just they found that it's not particularly politically popular. There have been several examples now where Seattle voters say that they would prefer taxing corporations and rich people over
Yep.
making big service cuts. And so
Yeah.
it just, and we've seen that in the primary results, in the social housing results, in
Yeah.
Alexis Mercedes Rink's ringing success, and
Yeah.
uh, even Bruce Harrell's proposing this B&O tax proposal. So it
Yeah.
just doesn't have the political power that it did in 2023 and 21.
Yeah, I guess I was trying to look ahead. What impact do you think this 6-year review will actually have on the upcoming budget process? They're looking at a lot of data there, but do you think it'll actually change the way they deliberate, or how do you look at that?
I think it could in theory in the general scheme. I don't think it will in the 2 months that they have to
Yeah, yeah.
process this because you're not you're not fixing because the thing about this budget is it is systemically out of whack. They
Mm,
can fix it year after each year by kind of patching holes, but the way that it's structured right now, every year there's going to be a deficit. And so
hmm.
that is, if you want to not have this problem come up every year, you either have to raise a whole bunch of new money or make a whole bunch of cuts.
Right.
And they haven't really done either of those. They're probably going to raise some more money and they're making some cuts, but it's not like a permanent fix to this problem. And so they do still have to have that conversation
Right.
one way or the other. They're not going to have it in 2 months, though.
Yeah, and I just was looking at some of these kind of final points that Ben Noble had brought up, which is, hey, look, inflation has affected the cost of delivering these programs. You've got expanding programs because the population has been growing. We're talking about, new and expanded programs because you have new sources of revenue there. I mean, these are some big macro issues we're talking about here. And I think I see what you're saying. You're not going to solve out all that within the span of 8 weeks.
No, and so that's why, it seems like the most likely thing is what happened last year and the year before that, which is they move enough money around, they bring in some additional revenue. They will make some cuts. I think Harold forecasted that I'm sure that the departments will see something up to 8%
Yeah,
cuts.
right. Hmm.
Not the public safety or homelessness departments. They'll probably be more like 2%, if anything. So
Yeah,
there will be some cuts, but um, this isn't they well, we'll see what Harold announces, but
right.
I think to make it so they don't have to deal with this problem every single year,
Yeah.
they do have to take a big swing one direction or the other. That's either
Yep.
raise new taxes on corporations or whatever it might be,
Hmm.
or find whole programs that they don't want to fund anymore
Yeah.
and eliminate those. But again, that's just not really work. The work of these next 2 months is really responding to the mayor's budget and
Yep.
making tweaks around the edges.
Yep.
It's not really the time to be making that whole kind of systemic fix. Um, we'll know a lot more next week when the mayor announces his budget.
Very true. All right. Well, coming up, I'm not going to say I told you so. I'm going to tell you David told you so. When it comes to crashes on scooters in Seattle on the rise, some details coming up on what's next. So, David, Axios put out a piece about this last week. Then your colleague Naomi Ishisaka had another story on it this week. Crashes involving scooters are going up in Seattle. UW researchers found scooter-related medical encounters in Seattle increased from 9 in between 2018 and 2020 to 273 between 2021 and 23. I just remember talking to you about this a couple years ago, David, when you were working in the transportation beat there. I'm going to guess these numbers don't surprise you.
No, they don't surprise me.
It's unfortunate, but yes.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. They don't surprise me. I don't know the extent of these injuries. I don't know if you have that, if they go into that,
I don't have all of them in front of me, but there are some indications that there's some neurological cases involved, which definitely could have been prevented, meaning they're not wearing a helmet and they're getting head injuries for sure.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, there is a risk that comes with biking or riding a scooter in Seattle,
Yeah.
and the scooters, the rental bikes and scooters, don't necessitate that you have helmets.
Yeah.
No one's enforcing that anyway. Um, I think it's just a civil penalty at this point because the county repealed
That's
the
right.
law.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't surprise me. I think it is always, again, worth putting into context of how often people get hurt
Hmm.
on driving and via with cars. I
Yeah.
think that's the counter argument here is it might not be perfectly safe, but it is a convenient option for people. Um, so it doesn't surprise me. I don't know what it is to be done about them because they're quite popular.
Yeah.
If you go down particularly along the waterfront or going to ball games, they're very heavily used, and so of course numbers will go up with usage.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would imagine we'll probably start to see some more kind of safety campaigns and encouraging people to wear helmets.
Oh yeah.
There was the idea of if you take a selfie with yourself wearing a helmet, you get $1 off.
Yeah.
I think the carrot approach probably makes the
A little
most
more
sense right
sense.
now versus the
Mhm.
stick because I don't know who's bringing the stick to this
Yeah. To this fight.
to
Yeah.
this fight.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I've used them before too. I remember Bumbershoot, it was last year, parked a little distance away, but then got on one of those scooters like zip, zip, zop, and you're there. I'm like, oh man, it's crazy convenient. But I
Well,
did notice as well when I was riding there how many kids who were younger than 18. It's supposed to be 18 as a minimum age to rent these things, but it's kind of tough to enforce that part too, because I can imagine younger kids who wouldn't care about a helmet at all that want to do that. Do you have any thoughts on trying to change that trend? Because that one feels really difficult to try to solve.
yeah, that's a good point. And maybe they have some kind of ID requirement.
Yeah,
I don't
right.
know what it is. And yeah, you see this thing of you sometimes you see multiple kids on one
Oh, yeah,
scooter.
yeah, yeah.
Um, that stuff's tough.
Yeah. I
You
shake
know,
my fist at them whenever I can. Hmm.
and they're a little clunky. I'm not. I usually ride my bike, but if I get a flat or something, then
Hmm.
I'll take one of these. And Yeah, they're a little clunky. Some of, the scooters, your center of gravity is pretty low.
Yeah.
I can imagine, and I think, it's people kind of casually entering. Unfortunately, Seattle is not a great spot for casual riders, which
Mm,
is, a bigger conversation to have. But it is
sure.
just between the interactions you're having with cars and the hills and everything, it is can be a difficult place to jump in.
Yeah.
I was biking the other day, and Yesler Hill is technically a bike route, so
Oh, yeah, right. Sure it
stuff
is.
like that where you're following the bike maps, but you can still end up in fairly dangerous places.
Yeah.
I think I think that is another piece of it is how much of this is related to scooters and how much is this just because the system itself is still not particularly conducive to casual
Yeah.
riders trying it out for the first time.
Hmm.
So certainly concerning. At the same time, I do think that they're I enjoy them. I use them pretty regularly. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people do. So I don't know that it's like they're going away anytime soon, but
Yeah.
I would think that there's some conversation to be had around who and how they're being used.
Absolutely. Absolutely true. David, it is time to wrap up with you here, and I did want to make sure that I made this point. I, like you, am mourning the passing of Robert Redford this week. Millions of people are. Star in many movies, including a touchstone for journalists, All the President's Men. He starred as reporter Bob Woodward. I just watched this a couple of months ago, and I was really struck by the power that reporters like Woodward and Bernstein had in that era when they called people like, whoa, I need to pick up the phone and talk to this guy. It's such a different dynamic now. A political figure can brush you off with an email or a text or create their own podcast and find another way to push back. How do you compare that depiction of reporting in the 1970s to what it is today? What do you think?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's a lot more shoe leather.
Mm,
Uh, it's a lot more kind of it seems like it's a lot more going to people's doors,
yes, right.
and that was the expectation. I think I like you said there, and this has really changed a lot even since the pandemic, that there is just this pernicious knee-jerk response on even basic questions for people to just send email answers. The
Hmm.
ability of getting somebody on the phone to just talk through something. It doesn't
Yes,
have to be deep throat. We're not talking Watergate.
right.
I want
Seriously.
someone from the Office of Housing to sit down with me and have a conversation about why the affordable housing industry is
Yep.
struggling. And they
Right.
have to go through 18 levels of approval with
Yes.
communication people, and
Hmm.
the mayor has to personally sign off. I don't think that's true. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there is this sort of top heavy, especially in government, way of controlling who and can talk to the media, and everything's so there's so many digital watermarks that
Oh,
people
yeah.
are paranoid about getting caught even
Hmm.
speaking to a reporter. I
Yeah.
do think that makes it harder. At the same time, the feeling of having a conversation with a source on the phone and getting them
Hmm.
to tell you something, and the relief that comes with that's still part of it. And every time my enthusiasm for journalism flags, I watch that movie or
Hmm.
Spotlight or The
Yep.
Paper, a few
Yep.
of the journalism movies that I like.
Absolutely true. And I gotta say, Bob Woodward totally scored on having Robert Redford depict him because you look at
Yeah.
them like back in the day in real life, it's like, dude, Redford, he looks nothing like you, man. You
Yeah.
gotta
You got to glow up in that
yeah,
one.
big major upgrade. Well, anyway, rest in peace, Robert Redford. David, thank you as always for joining me here, and thanks to everybody listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Thanks again to patrons who support the show. Pat, shout out to you. If you want to be a patron, believe in yourself and make it happen. Consider a pledge of $5 or more per month on Patreon. Thanks again to everyone out there supporting the show. You can hear this podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. Thanks for watching on Converge Media, too. See you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2020.